Here's an SLP that knows social skills. She's published Let's Talk Social Skills, which is available through SpeechMark. She has conversation starters that focus on self-perception, like I'm good at. She has friendships, which is 3 ways to say hello. She has social responsibility, what jobs you have for that particular day, and conversation skills, how to get started and keep the topics going and closing, how to build in nonverbal skills to what you're saying, and social negotiation. All these skills are skills that children who use AAC need too. And she's seen results using AAC and advocating for children with complex communication needs. All right, tell us about how you made connections with one little guy.
Hello, this is Dr. Lesley, Mayne, speaking now. And about a month ago, I was working with a 6th grade boy who had been working on putting sentences together using the app Speak for Yourself. And as a younger child, we had been using static displays and definitely the AbleNet switches to help him communicate, and he was ready to take that step to begin to put more complex language together. And so we had been working on modeling and putting sentences together, and one day it was that moment of aha, it connected for him, and he looked at me, he went to his communication, and he put together a 5-word sentence, made an error, self-corrected, without looking at me, and did it. And it was one of those moments where you get that chill or that aha, and it was a major celebration. And you just work and work and work as anybody knows when you're working with a child with complex communication needs. And when that connection happens, it is just outstanding. That was just what a thrill to be a part of that experience for him and for his family. It was just a fantastic opportunity. So now you get to meet Dr. Sharon Rogers. I know if you've joined us for the first 3 or a couple of webinars, you've been introduced to Dr. Sharon Rogers. And I spoke before how she's been working on the International Classification of Functioning, Disability, and Health for Children and Youth, which was introduced by the World Health Organization. And Travis Thress was the primary United States author, and ASHA has adopted the WHO ICF for Children and Youth guidelines that ASHA calls a framework for the field and scope of practice. So the key points for the WHO ICF can be accessed from the ASHA website. You can do a quick search, Google search, and it will pull up, actually a search on the ASHA website. And really the point is to look at disability as a spectrum. A person's no longer classified as abled or disabled. The approach is through a biopsychosocial approach. So looking at the biology, obviously we need to understand what's going on organically and medically, and then you take a look at the psychology of the child and the social aspect and how they are connecting to their world. So it's going beyond just, here's the disability. It's fine, here's the disability. Now, what are we going to do to make that connection for that child to know they're effective and vital part of communication in their environment? So it looks at function and participation, and Sharon now is going to tell you about a success that she has had for a child with complex communication needs.
Yes. Making that connection with this little girl, Joy, who was a 12-year-old with a progressive form of muscular dystrophy, was a wonderful experience. The AAC specialist at the rehabilitation center nearby recommended that Joy learn the Morse code with a light touch because that would be an easy access for her, that and the trackball. So Angela, the assistive technology instructional assistant, decided to work on it during the summer school, which would be a bonus time. But Joy was not too interested and was reluctant to try this crazy dot dash thing. Then Angela asked a couple of Joy's friends to come and join her as they together could learn the code. Well, that was partially successful, but what really put it on, they started the game Wheel of Fortune. Then the code made sense because they were looking for letters, they were looking for phrases, and Joy worked up to being able to type with Morse code 11 words a minute. So that by the next year, when she was in 6th grade, she produced a 30-page paper on the American colonies. That was being connected, and that was being very productive.
Yes, so you see connection in a couple different ways. In my example, it was just time and practice and still a motivating activity, but we had that connection. For Joy, it was, well, I'm not sure this is going to work for me. But now that my friends are here and we've made it really fun and now I've got a purpose and a reason, now I've got a great connection. So you always find that way in. So here we are within the middle presentation of our 5-part series. So we are at making connections. In the first presentation, we were looking at what's happening for the child and what can we do to elicit participation. Then with building fundamentals, we're starting to connect language, maybe 1 or 2 words putting together, maybe moving towards 4 ways or more to communicate. And now here we are at making connections. So the child is having some communication success, probably still supported quite a bit, but growing. And now it's time for us to put some pieces together for them. And as you see, pieces are being put together by themselves. And then in bridging skills on June 4th, we will move towards independence with participation, looking at probably a child being successful in certain contexts, like maybe structured playtime, less support required in those, and maybe still more support required in other settings. And then finally, we'll get to maximizing participation on June 25th, where we will talk about independence. Really, what can we do to help that child be successful with less. Now, we are still talking about children, so there's always going to be a degree of adult support. But essentially, we're talking about trying, supporting that child to be as independent as possible. Now, in the last few sessions, we've gone over Janice Light's 4 purposes of communication. I've given you the reference on the bottom. This is sort of seminal work that she completed in 1988 and 1989. Reviewing the competencies. So the 4 purposes of communication are social closeness for relationships, information transfer of ideas and meanings, social etiquette, and then wants and needs. And we've spoken before about how wants and needs tend to dominate communication boards, and we really need to focus on relationships, on transferring academic knowledge or just knowledge that you have to communicate with friends, the social etiquette conventions, and helping kids be successful. So we're really talking about a continuation point at this stage. So with social closeness, we can look at language like let's play house, let's play cars. So we're starting to put ideas so that we can connect a child to other children or adults as well. And then an information transfer, looking at words like I went to grandma's house, I see the kids, or expressing a sequence. So I'll do this in therapy where it's not just using the curriculum, but if our kids often look around and they get connected and seeing what other kids are doing, so I'll have them tell me, what do you see? So that they can talk and put language to what they're seeing and doing, and not just, okay, come on, keep your eyes on the curriculum or whatever it is we're working on. So allow them, hey, if they're engaged in seeing 2 kids walking into the library with their backpacks, see what you can do to have the child express about what they see going on. So it validates their ideas and thoughts, and then you can redirect back to what your curriculum target is at the time. And then with social etiquette, my turn, your turn, probably knows who's being spoken to, the peer, a known adult, an authority figure. So starting to get an idea of what language maybe you should be using in certain contexts. And then wants and needs, maybe a little bit more negotiating at this point, going beyond just this is what I want, but negotiating choices for toys or books or turn-taking. So with the language in general, you're starting to see more content words and function words, linking words. So, and you might wonder if you're pushing too hard, and no, you're not. Keep trying. This is the stage where you start playing with language and what you can put together to make more elaborate sentences or more grammatically correct sentences, just to give children more options with language. And here are the competencies. And we talked about them before, but our linguistic competence is using language, again, to connect thoughts. So using our connecting words and our adverbial phrases and that sort of thing. With operational competence, we're talking about a technical skill to control volume or repair a message. And what's interesting is you might see children do this automatically because you've been modeling the whole time, even though you may not have intended, but you've been modeling turning up volume or adjusting the brightness or, all the manipulations that go on, or correcting a message for them because they weren't ready to repair that message and they saw how you did that. So it wouldn't be unusual at this stage for them to start doing some of these things, either on their own spontaneously or since you've modeled so much, for them to learn this somewhat quickly. So, if there are physical disabilities that impede that ability to navigate the operational skills or navigate the operational aspects of the communication device, I think it's still a good idea to talk about it so that eventually you can get to the point. I'm about to skip over social, sorry, to get to that strategic. So you're enlisting ideas and utilizing support to get communication and belongings ready or operational. And then, of course, I'll go back, to social, where an option to target social skills is a communication wallet for quick social greetings. So a communication wallet is literally what I use as a physical wallet, a traditional Velcro wallet that I picked up conveniently at a convenience store or something like that, and put social messages in the little wallet protector, the plastic encasing. I'm going to show you next webinar on how to put a communication wallet together, so I hope you join us next time, and we'll review the date again at the end. But I really enjoy using social communication wallets because even if you have an iPad or a speech-generating device, they can be a little awkward, and the wallets are quick, open, socially acceptable. You get a quick message across, and you're on your way. You can also use Big Mac switches or Jelly Bean switches, small communication boards, also work well with peers on the playground or passing in the hall, so there are other strategies. Okay. So basically what I want you to walk away with as far as the competencies are concerned is that this is a therapeutic framework. So you can ask yourself this question when you're thinking about generating an IEP or just working with a child in general. Have I considered the linguistic demands of the child? Have I considered the operational demands of the device and the abilities of the child to access that? Have I looked at the social needs, and how can I do that? Is a communication board, is a communication wallet a good way to go? Is a switch the best way to go? In a classroom, maybe you might have different needs in a classroom versus being outside, which is why we're offering different options. And then strategic. What can we do to help the child learn to gain a little bit more independence with strategic communication? Here is a picture of the wallet so that you have an idea of what I'm talking about. And I have a little tip for you regarding messaging. So obviously, sometimes children can say hello, goodbye, yes, or no. And they might even be able to say the hi, how are you, I'm fine sequence without requiring these images that you're seeing now. But oftentimes there are word approximation or intelligibility issues. So my two rules of thumb are, first of all, if an unknown communication partner understands the message the child is producing verbally, then you probably don't require it in the wallet. Went back and forth a couple years ago with a little guy and the teacher who said, but he can say yes and no. I said, okay, we know what he's saying when he says yes and no, but would the average person off the street, if he said yes or no to them or hi and goodbye to them, would they know? And there was a big pause. Okay, fine, we'll keep it. And it wasn't long. Actually, it was maybe another year. And then we did take it out because his intelligibility improved. So you just consider that. The other consideration would be, okay, fine, there is verbal communication and it's appropriate, but in the case of a child with autism or another social pragmatic disorder, then you might want the sequence in there just as a guide. So that would be another reason you might want to keep it in the wallet, even if there is intelligibility. All right, so that is just a little flavor, and again, next week we'll go into all the goodies that you can include in, or not next week, in a couple weeks, what will be in the communication wallet.
Okay, so what's the scope of making connections? We're going to build on what the child is already doing with their voices and their eyes, their bodies, even their silence. And we want to clarify the messages that the child offers using an aided form, 20 questions may clarify some messages, but that's a pretty slow way. When we want the child to be an active participant doing what others are doing, so others recognize the context and the script that is happening. And we want to employ social stories that suggest the way conversations and scripts usually go, so that the child has a framework to work on and that they could rely on. Damasio is a neuroscientist at the University of Southern California, Lesley's alma mater. He wrote in Descartes' error that every thought we have and act upon first goes through an emotional filter, whether it's important to act upon it or not. So we must be sure that we're dealing with the children's emotions first, make communication motivating, get those mirror neurons to operate as they do in social interaction, and learn the words, and then putting them together in a language creates new thinking possibilities.
Now, as we start to think about all our great communication, it's also a great time to throw in the idea of educational inclusion and all the different components included in educational inclusion. So we are talking about physical integration, which short of is the obvious one, social integration, the ability to be connecting with both children and adults, access to normalized education, access to recreation, and access to social activities. The reference for this is through Buchelman and Miranda, 2005. And also, as we head into AAC, I wanted to mention that it's really important, and anybody who knows who's been working with AAC, it's everyone's role and responsibility to foster a child's communication. So from the get-go, I can tell you I wasn't good at this early on. It was, I'm the SLP and I'm in charge of AAC, and that's what I do, and nobody else does it. Well, obviously you don't get a lot of gains if you're the only one doing it. So now I jump in right away, even at the beginning of a referral, and say, okay, this is everyone's role and responsibility, and everybody needs to be on the same page. And if you train and get everyone together and focused, it's a much better success rate and integration across home and school and in the community. So here are the 4 components of educational inclusion again, but it's broken out just a little bit more, so you have kind of some time to think about the ideas within a broader context to increase success. The link to this image is no longer available, unfortunately. I searched everywhere to try to find it. I found this a while ago. So the closest reference I have for you is the URL listed underneath the title. This link will actually lead to a great PowerPoint on inclusion, and I highly recommend that you explore the materials here. So when we're talking about integration, we have full integration, we have selected, and then we have another component of the education. So there are 3 different components of each one, and it just allows you to understand to what degree and what support a child is being included.
Let's look at those 7 categories of adults who promote AAC and need to think about these are the same as in getting started in building fundamentals. They're basic. First of all, we look at social interaction because we are primarily social human beings, so we'll build on that. And then there's the communication skills and activities that we want the kids to be able to participate in. We'll say more about literacy as a foundation of communication, and access to more complex tools is certainly in order, as more needs need to be said and done. And we know it takes time and flexibility to get the job done, so we will offer a few shortcuts.
So here we are with making connections, social interaction. And if you are in not the best mood right now, your task is to look into the eyes of one of these children and tell me you are now not smiling. I just love this photo. Each grin is engaging, and what can we say? They're playing Uno, and that's what we do. Uno and bubbles seem to be the tools of the trade, although just this week I had a student tell me that they were doing an observation of some other students, student SLPs, and the child had no interest in the bubbles whatsoever. And they kept trying because they said, but
I've got bubbles.
Kids, I have bubbles. And it's not working. So, yes, and I hear that the students did not do a great job of adjusting, so they, but that's why we're students. That's why we train. Anyway, it was pretty funny. So, when somebody asks me, what do I do? And I try to explain what AAC is, you often get that sort of furrowed brow, augmentative alternative communication, helping people with most complex communication needs, and then I'll break it down and say, okay, I'm a learning doctor. And they kind of get that, then they ask if I give shots. And I say, no, I don't give shots. And then I boil it down again, I say, I teach kids how to play. And then they like that. That's a good thing. That's a good way to explain it. All right, so when we're talking about social interaction, Sharon's going to tell us about that.
Yeah, social interaction begins with real events and activities. And the jobs that are in school, you're assigned for a day, or something that they really want, a book that they really want to have. We know we put weather on the communication devices, but sunny, rainy, snowy are kind of generic terms that sometimes change rather quickly, so that's not nearly as motivating as some of the day-to-day activities that the kids are involved in. So we may want them to find a clever way to say, no, thank you, or I'd prefer to do it another way, as another way of getting social interaction. We like kids to make faces for emotions about characters in a story, and it's a fun way to emphasize and identify that word on the speech-generating device. A friend sent me a DVD that asked children to imitate actions by watching the various vertical and horizontal arm movements and hand movements. And that was to reduce stress and calm the child's tempo down. And so I thought, well, we can try about this. We can see this. I was working with our 9 and 12-year-old grandchildren, and there had been way too much television, and so we started doing these simple little hand movements with music, and we found that was a very wonderful way to promote imitation that was quite very simple to do, and yet it gave a certain harmony to our conversation. So that was a wonderful way to get started. I think Lesley's going to talk about motor neurons for a few minutes.
Yes, Dr. Sharon Rogers brought up mirroring neurons, and research on autism shows in brains of kids with autism that the mirroring neurons sometimes are compromised. So the mirroring neurons occur, or their job is for people to help understand emotions in others. So you're watching that great Olympic ice skating event, and the person falls, and you just, you gasp, you're crushed, you feel what they feel, and you think, oh no, this is emotionally devastating, it's physically devastating. And that is your mirror neurons working full steam ahead. So it was interesting. A few weeks ago, I had a boy who was copying my facial expression, and this little boy happens to have some GI issues, and I had my brow furrowed, apparently, and I was just looking at his screen and trying to get things organized, so I had this sort of furrowed look while I was getting organized. I looked at him, and all of a sudden he had this look on his face, and I thought, oh no, you're not feeling well. You were fine one glance ago, you were fine. And I thought, oh, and so I lightened up my face, and he lightened up his face. And I furrowed my brow again, and he furrowed his brow. And this is the first time he had ever done anything like this. It was so exciting and fantastic. So anyway, that was just a great example. And you never know. So up to this point, I'd been working with this particular child for, 3 years. And that was the first time he had done that behavior. It was fantastic. All right. So here we have more on social interaction. As you can tell, a little fun with picking out pictures for the slide. We couldn't decide on which was better or more appropriate, so we went with both little silly pictures. Ideas on acting silly are provided.
Yeah. Why does that child love to put on sunglasses, like the Blues Brothers, or put a fake microphone in front of them and they become rock stars? Well, dress up a puppet or a cat or everyone has a laugh. I think this releases tension and makes communication and life just plain more interesting.
So I absolutely love this photograph. We have a golden retriever's head cocked to the side, almost in utter encouragement. We talked last time about joint reference. So clearly our golden retriever here and our child have joint reference on this task. And hopefully they have joint attention too. I don't know if they've made eye contact before or after this photo, but just absolutely love it.
I think there was a question here about what an SGD was. That's a speech-generating device. Medicare came up with that term, and as long as they fund it, we're glad for that term, and it is used across the board.
Great question. Sorry about that. All right, so some communication skills and activities. So you can use pretend play to build on life experiences. Remember, we want to encourage our kids to have the same life experiences as typically developing kids so they can build language. And again, the research shows that children with complex communication needs are spoken to much less often than typically developing children. So we need to speak to them. We need interaction at school, home, and in the community as much as possible so we can draw on that language to build their language development. So some great ways to do that with a pretend play are going to a restaurant, getting hurt. How are you going to manage that process? Car racing. Kids love Band-Aids anyway. Board games, modeling winning and losing. So those are great behaviors to practice in therapy, especially for a child who might have behavior issues. I love using the game Cariboo. Cariboo you can pick up. Target is usually where I find it, although I think any major toy store would have it. And it's great because you drop these little balls throughout a maze that's underneath, and then the child puts a key into one of the little compartments, and it opens up, and there either is a ball or there isn't a ball. And when there's not, you can say, "Oh no!" You can use that language because you don't win every time. And it's hard and it's frustrating, but if you can give a child language within a less emotionally involved situation, you can really foster some growth and language within a complex situation. Down the road. Candyland's always a go-to. And then stopping an activity, behavior, knowing that they need to finish one more time before you're done. Sometimes our kids are like, "Oh, we're done," walking away. And our rule generally is one more turn, and then you can be done. So there's a sense of completion, of control, and that it's not just, okay, I can walk away whenever I'm ready to go. And then also it's that opportunity to build language to terminate an activity. The other great activity I like to use are puzzles, and one of my students in class said, "Well, you can't generate language with a puzzle." And I said, "Oh, absolutely you can. You become the shopkeeper. You keep all the pieces, and they need to use language to ask for the part that they want." And if they're interlocking puzzles, oftentimes colors or body parts or sections are on different pieces, so they have to use specific language. So for our child at this stage, it could be I want the blue shoe. And if it's two, you can show them two, and they can say this shoe, that shoe, and use eye contact. So that would be an idea for language. Here's another example. It's called One Thing I Did Today. And our parents and families often want to know what happened during the child's day. So there's a couple ways you can structure it. You can use the who, what, when, where structure to put a little story map together of what happened and actually generate a sentence. So in this example, Katie played a game at recess on the grass. And you can work on rebuilding that structure using their speech-generating device, or you can do a series of activities that were completed in a day. So it doesn't have to be a who, what, when, where kind of thing. It can be whatever you want to choose to represent that language, but it helps the parents understand or families understand what the child did during the day and a bit of the structure of language that you're targeting for them. So it's a great little springboard between home and school or therapy. Here is a social story. It's another way to help behavior, language, and connection to situations. The social stories come from Carol Gray. The website is at the base of the slide. And these social stories are a great way to help bridge socially challenging situations with language for children to reduce stress, increase understanding of a situation, and improve social success. So in this example, taking turns while playing games, the emphasis is on I statements. I play games with my friends. This is what I do.
Good.
Sometimes I play with one friend. Sometimes I play with 2 or 3 friends, so that they're getting the idea that it might be a one thing, it could be a variation. And then talking about how that game's going to play. We roll a die to see who plays first. If my number is higher, I go first. If my number is lower, my friend goes first. So it's just talking the person through what they would actually do in this situation. And then next, I wait while my friends roll the die and move his or her marker. Sometimes I want to look around the room. Instead, I watch and listen while she answers her question. And that's, you get in the pragmatic, you sort of throw that in. I take my turn when my friend is finished. She watches and listens to me too. So that is just one example. And if you go, again, to the Grade Center, there are many, many more stories. She has, I think, at least 2, maybe more books out and different formats as well. So we really thank Carol Gray for her ingenuity in developing these social stories. And here's yet another. The Autism Spectrum Directory provides many different lists. I'm going to show you one in the next slide of social stories and visual scripts for daily living and social skills. It's very extensive. It's really fantastic. You have social stories, visual scripts, pairing words with pictures of events and activities that happen in daily life. So all of the different areas that they cover, if it sparks your interest for any kids you're working with, the daily events, bedtime, feelings, emotions, and then more serious things like going to the doctor, dealing with dentists, dealing with holidays and safety. So you have the good kind of fun things that we do academically, and then some more serious things as well to help a child regulate themselves and their language through these situations. So here we go. Here is one of the samples, and it happens to be a birthday party, which we know to be frequently a challenging situation, not just for kids with autism, but any sort of self-regulation issue. I had a gal who was not autistic, and birthday parties were just a frightful thing. And she was in preschool, and so we sang the birthday song just incidentally if we happened to be counting to 5. Oh, let's sing the happy birthday song for 5. And, really had to, Anyway, she eventually, it took a couple years to help her regulate her way through. Anyway, so here's a picture of a birthday scene that has words and icons. This will be appropriate for some children, not appropriate for others because it might be too visually complex. You might have a child who doesn't require the icons, who just needs the orthographic representation, just needs the words. So you can kind of take that as it goes. Another way, this just happens to be how this was represented. You can also do it in a traditional scripting way and just have pictures, more like representing a visual scene would be another way to represent this type of information.
We like facilitators to have strategies up their sleeve, and sometimes they're very helpful, and sometimes they make for difficulty. And so, but that's also for good laughs, like Lesley was saying. This is Statler and Waldorf from Sesame Street and the Muppets, and they get us to laughing pretty quickly. Statler says, "Can you sing tenor?" Waldorf says, "What?" Statler says, "Can you sing tenor, as in 10 or 12 miles from here?" Or Waldorf says, "Where were you when the lights went out?" Statler says, "In the dark. Where else, you old fool?" all for good laughs. So what are some of the facilitator strategies? You read books together. You program basic words that are emotions and funny nouns and contemporary expressions and action words in a sequence. And you find ways to partner words. You have Statler and Waldorf, Ernie and Bert, the child's name and a friend. You can say, "I went for a ride and we stopped for ice cream," or "went for a walk." If you read the Runaway Bunny, you say, you learn the if-then. If you become a bird, then the mother bunny says, then I will become a tree that you can fly home to. Or, if you do this one more time, then you will get a break. Those are if-then sequences that are good. Brown bear, you program in the speech-generating device recurring phrases from the book. "What do you see?" And then they reply, I see a, and then they can choose the color and the animal. So each time you come to that phrase, a child can help read the story with you. Even Eric Carl's The Grouchy Ladybug could be programmed for the child as a ladybug to say, "Hey, you, do you want to fight?" The animal replies, "If you insist." And then the ladybug replies, "Oh, you're not big enough anyway." So this is a pretend activity of going to the restaurant. The sequence of driving to the restaurant, go inside, order your food using AAC, take the food to the table, eat and enjoy. You can go over the script, greeting, and then you wait, ask for the hamburger or fries, and wait for the wait person to ask, "Anything else?" "No, thanks." "Well, how much?" Say thank you and pay for the food, and then go and enjoy. A simple thing that you can do is, if then is the balloon. I had a little guy who really loved this balloon sequence, and we had 4 different choices. He could ask me to blow the balloon, blow it bigger, and then once it was big enough, he could say either let it pop or let it fly. And that was a fun if-then cause and effect event. Then we have setting up play actions for playing cars using AAC. When you want to have fun, we play with toy cars. We can say, we each choose a color, we line the cars up, we say, "Ready, set, go," "On your mark," or "Get, set, go." We let the cars go and we see which one goes. Ahead of time you can decide, is it the speed, is it the distance, is it the path that they chose? And maybe now in this space age we don't say "ready, set, go." We say 3, 2, 1, ignition, blast off. And that makes it even more fun.
Now we head into making connections with literacy. Last week we introduced you to the idea that with literacy you want to look at it 2 different ways. One is the child's interest level in reading, so stories that might be read to them that are wonderful, and then the child's reading level. So there could be a difference at this point, and you want to expose the child to both.
We're drawing from the Children with Disabilities Reading and Writing, The 4 Blocks Way by Karen Erickson and David Copenhaver, 2007. They introduce writing with words, which is the emphasis we're going to have on this, because we're looking at word families, the words that rhyme together, cat, hat, sat. We're looking at word walls, putting words on the wall of the schoolroom so the kids are surrounded in print. And then when the opportunity comes for the class to recite what's on the word wall, you can program a step-by-step, and the child can read the words on the word wall at the same time as the rest of the class is participating in this event. We want to match sight words with each other so that they can see how they're similar and how they're different. We want to act out the story with or without words so that they get the feelings, so they get the emotions. And we change up words sometimes so that we do a hickory-dickory-dock. The mouse ran up the clock. Oh, the sock? Oh, the dock. Which one is it? We use foam cutouts of letters with icons on top to show the initial consonants. All these are some basic reading strategies to use when you're working with words. Karen and David Copenhaver also talk about self-guided reading. They talk about writing, and they talk about guided reading. So those are their 4 major blocks. When we're talking about words, I really rely on Janice Light and David McNaughton's Accessible Literacy Learning, which came out in 2011. On page 93, you'll find what they suggest about letters that need to be associated with sounds, and you begin with the most familiar first. And these are the ones, the sequence that they have, which I feel is very valuable. You teach the short vowels before the long vowels because those are used more frequently. You teach the lowercase before the uppercase, and you don't teach the names of the letters. You actually teach them the sounds of the letters as the primary association they have with those particular letters. And then you blend the consonant, vowel, consonant together. You're also looking for words that may have the same sound in them, but one may be blue for the color and one may be blue for blowing. And the next one is on narrative development. You begin with the child in the short phrases we've been talking about. It encourages sentence development and building on past experience in the present and connecting the personal and academic. Wonderful educator that I know said she just uses PowerPoint all the time for putting the text in or simplifying a text and then putting the picture or scanning the picture in. One day I'd gone to Dr. Buchelman's summer institute on augmentative alternative communication, and I wanted to find out what were some of the research issues that he had to deal with. So I asked for an appointment, and when I was going into his office, he said, make sure kids are able to tell a story, because that's so much of what our conversation is all about. So Roger Schenck has a book called Tell Me the Story, and How to Tell a Story, and Catherine Nelson has done one wonderful story about young minds in social worlds. So that becomes a very fun part of the day. Once upon a time, the other day simply starts a good story. Read the story with the pictures printed above the text and filling in the missing words and eventually telling the whole sentence. And writer read it wrong to get the child to notice, say, oops, not that way. And this way the child shares vital experiences of his or her life with others.
Another way is to help children write about their experiences. So you can make your own list. Being out and about, obviously, is key and a wonderful way to increase that participation. So actually going to that restaurant, having the opportunity to order, playing cards, field trips to the park or to the zoo. I love this face of this guy. Swimming. Now, obviously, it might be hard to take a communication device swimming, but that's where your clear contact paper comes in with your communication boards. And you can have them in Ziplocs and do the best you can, especially as we head into summer here. And then the market and the library, just having those experiences. And I know it's not easy. That's much easier said than done. But maybe providing, maybe for telling parents, okay, now take your child. It doesn't have to be during the big shop of the week, but maybe it's to go pick up that one item or those few items and building up the opportunity for success. Speaking of success, when you do something important, like adding vocabulary to your thinking, you get a star in your honor. So here's your star power. People notice that changes their view of you and the child. So expectations rise in this stage, and we encourage you to go for it with our connections with vocabulary.
Yeah, and vocabulary targets. We put phrases together to express thoughts so that they can have a quick hit and get the whole phrase in. We program words like and but, or, because, if, then, so that those are handing words that they can put ideas together. We have the child locate words to regulate his own behavior and that of others, and we show the past tense as well as the present tense. And we're drawing now from Sarah Blackstone's work on early developmental competencies, children with complex communication needs. The primary emotions that she identifies are love, affection. How many times is I love you one of the first things kids say with their speech-generating devices? They can express anger. They can express sadness and fear. Sadness may be hard to picture, but its feeling is quite distinct. Sadness when someone leaves or monsters go with fear. Then laughter often goes with surprise, but also can be scary. And joy and happiness go together on the speech-generating device. And finally, disgust is a modification of emotion that the children often feel. We're looking here at targets for the vocabulary so that we can have plurals. One little person I was working with wanted to tell me what she wanted to see at recess time, and she typed girl, and I thought that was enough, and then she put an S. So it was to be part of the clique that was out on the playground. Find a way to make that statement negative. Articles make the noun less specific by saying a ball, and more specific to say the ball. And expand on fringe, you remember my appealing fringe words and core vocabulary words. So they've got those tools handy. And stay current with the kids' language and slang. There was just a recent article that said how often we put in what we adults would say, but need to ask the other children what they would say. And that's have to be more what the child using AAC would like to use too.
So now we're heading into tools and making connections for access. So take-home lesson number 1 is be willing to be surprised. So we have on here a keyboard, an adapted keyboard. It has 1-inch keys that are color-coded. Other options for keyboarding are using a switch, a roller trackball, mouse, on-screen keyboards on the computer are a good idea too. So the one you see is Big Keys. Again, you can do a general Google search to find a variety of Big Keys keyboards. The one that I have here is through bigkeys.com, and it has an accessibility with an iPad as well. So that is something to keep in mind. Another option is Kurzweil word prediction software. I know that you're probably thinking, whoa, you're getting way too far ahead. But I wanted to expose you to some of these ideas of computer access because you never know. If it's not appropriate for the child because they're making connections with language and it's not, you don't want to go here yet, fine. But there might be that child where this is completely appropriate to head into some keyboarding-alike skills. So word prediction is, I just happened to show you the Kurzweil, but there are other, like the Solo from Don Johnson has a co-writer option. And as the child puts letters in, it will predict words, and then the child can choose the number or select the word that they're trying to write. Now, research shows that using word prediction doesn't make the production of the material any faster, but it does assist with the spelling. So you kind of decide what is the most appropriate thing for the child. Here are 2 ways of organizing language. One is a categorical way to organize language. The other is linguistic. These happen to be 2 iPad, again, examples. And now the linguistic also has categories, but the categorical system one on the left would have for example, like, and then you would go into the food section and there would be the foods. So everything's built by categories. The other linguistic form has categories, but it also has verb forms with it too. So if you head under the food icon, you would have both verbs for choosing different types of foods, and you would have the actual types of foods. So it's looking at a more linguistic way. So not just the nouns, but verbs and other word forms underneath one category. Obviously, that's a little more cognitively complex, but it gives the child access to language, much broader range of language. So you've got to sort of decide what do you think the most appropriate way to continue is. And then, of course, before we have spoken about visual scenes and using those visual scenes because children can connect with the context a little easier to put language together. So there's lots of different ways you can head towards language, but I thought I'd introduce you to these 2 sort of ways that the larger speech-generating devices are organized. Then we head into our troubleshooting, and here we have this baby bear. We're not sure if he's in trouble or just getting a ride, but no matter what, Mom has troubleshooting down at this point, and she has definitely taken charge.
Troubleshooting right now, I understand that we didn't understand, the author of the book telling me the story is Roger Schank, S-C-H-A-N-K, and so that's the one about narrative and how important that is.
And so when we're looking at troubleshooting, it's sort of a when all else fails, go back to the manual. I know that sounds obvious, but just keep them around. You can either find them online or keep the manuals that come with the catalog or come with the devices, or you can call. That's the nice part. There's more ways to connect with the engineers and the folks producing these materials. If you go to AbleNet, you can get introduced to the type of curriculum that is available. So the Meville to Weeville is a great spiral-round book. It has curriculum related to sections of curriculum. Another option is Pat Miranda's work that informs the special education technologies from British Columbia, the SETI, and it's a great way to access information on curriculum.
And we want to make our goals realistic, but we want to make it fun. And we try one skill, we try one word, we try one icon, or we try one letter with one phrase, and make that work, because then that builds for success. It will take time, but when we can celebrate when it does work, even if it takes that one look that makes you understand that you're connected, it is a wonderful moment. Because then they can be the child can be confident about moving on to the next goal. Give yourself time, and as well as give the child time to respond. That's always a key with AAC, is having enough time. And I know typical kids have 5-second rule and they can to answer questions in the classroom. For some of our kids, the one little gal that I worked with, it really took 60 seconds to get the auditory processing, the motor planning processing, and to make her selection. I would count the seconds off by myself so that I didn't rush in too quickly, because she was moving in the right direction and I didn't want to cut her off.
Yes, we were talking yesterday that it might be a good idea for the therapist, because sometimes it's hard for us to stop talking, to use that time to count out. It will give you an idea of some data points to know how the child is progressing or not, and will help you maybe keep your mouth shut while they're trying to do the motor planning. You know what? You told a great story yesterday about the candle and the motor planning. Can you tell that story?
There was a little guy who was I saw on his YouTube video that they were making Easter wishes, and they were to blow the candle out. So they said, okay, now it's your turn, Nathan, to blow the candle out. And so you could see him moving his mouth together, and sure enough, within about a second and a half, they said, okay, and somebody blew the candle out for him, and there was Nathan trying to get his mouth together to blow, and it didn't work, or to make the wish, and I felt like my wish was, let's have a little more time before we cut him off.
We had a question on what apps was I referencing on slide 38, and the app on the right is Speak for Yourself app. So Speak for Yourself, and the one on the left-hand side was Touch Chat.
I think there was a question about slide number 9. We'll go back and see if we can clarify that one too.
Okay. All right. So here we are with Bridging Skills on June 4th. We look forward to seeing you to speak about that, and then Maximizing Participation on June 25th. And fur and feathers are not required, but we thought this is a great model of this wonderful inclusion that we're talking about.
We will look forward to your feedback as we make the final preparations for these presentations as well. This is a face shows how we feel when we make the right connections. We reach for even higher and more complex thinking and speaking. We feel like more communication partners might be our friends too, and look to the future where we're understood and have something to say. Making connections socially leads to greater participation and deeper and more emotionally satisfying engagement. Thank you for making time for participating in this webinar.
Okay, we have more questions, so let's see if we can get to that. So again, the apps were Speak for Yourself and Touch Chat. So Touch Chat was the second one. Okay, was there another?
No, I think that's good.
Okay.
Okay, and these webinars are recorded, so you can get to them.